Hello. Thank you very much. First of all, sorry, but I'm going to have to speak in English, so please bear with me. Can we flip? Okay, thank you. And the other point is, I tend to speak quite fast, even for people that speak English as their first language. So at any point, feel free to shout out and ask me to slow down. So the trouble of decision-making is a great subject. What I'm actually going to talk about is the trouble of influencing other people's decisions. It's hard enough to make a decision anyway, but to try and work out how to influence someone else's decision is very difficult. And I've only recently joined Draft FCB, only 6 weeks ago, and actually part of the reason I joined Draft FCB was because they set up the Institute of Decision Making, because they're so interested in this whole area of how humans make decisions, because if we understand how humans make decisions, do we as communicators stand any chance of influencing those decisions? And it's moving so rapidly that they actually set up their own institute, and that was a big draw for me to come and work for Draft FCB. So what I'm going to talk about is, and I can sum up my presentation on this one slide for you. What I'm going to talk about is influencing instinctive decisions. The reason I think that's important, I'm going to go through all of this as we go through, but the reason that's important is that up to 95% of the decisions we make all the time are instinctive. They happen unconsciously, they happen automatically. People buy the things which to them just feel right. That's the kind of brand I want to buy into. Now, the reason that's important is because if it's unconscious and people are making these decisions without even thinking about it, then how on earth, as advertisers or communicators or marketeers, do we stand a chance of ever influencing those decisions? I'm going to tell you. And the other thing to talk about as well is that neuroscience has gone absolutely mad at the moment. There's so much information coming out in the world of neuroscience that I think it's actually, my experience, which is primarily from the UK, is it's simply confusing everyone. No one really knows what to do with it because there's so much information, which is challenging everything that we've ever thought before. So I'm going to sort of talk through and try and simplify that a little bit and give some of the main things to focus on. So to talk a bit about what's happening right now, as has already been mentioned, we're going through what is a revolution in the world of understanding about how humans make decisions. John Barr of Yale University summed it up beautifully, I think, when he talked about the fact that just as Galileo displaced Earth from a privileged position of being at the center of the universe, at the moment we're going through the same situation where the conscious mind is being displaced from being the center of human behavior. So at the moment, psychologists, sociologists, neuroscientists, biologists, they're all working and they're all coming to the same conclusion that whereas we have believed, as far as we can go back, that the conscious mind is what makes most of our decisions for us, it's actually it's not the main player. The main actor in our decision-making and behavior is the unconscious mind. And that's the bit which, I'm not going to spend massive amounts on time of it, but you have to sort of buy into because that's the rest of the presentation. So the unconscious mind is also the emotional mind, okay? And this is the part of the mind, the conscious mind is the bit that we can hear the voice and we can direct it and it weighs things up. The unconscious mind just instinctively does what it wants to do. There's huge amounts of books coming out on it, and I'm sure many of you have read many of these books, and they explain this in a lot more detail. This is just a very small selection of the books that are out there. I recently went to a museum in London, the Wellcome Centre, and they were doing an exhibition on the brain, and there were so many books out there which are all on this subject. Daniel Kahneman has a book out at the moment. Daniel Kahneman, I'm sure many of you have heard of, I've probably read. He was the Nobel Prize winner of economics, and he was a psychologist, and he was the first person, along with his partner, to start talking about this area, about the unconscious mind, and to point out that we're not really rational beings at all. But his book, which is up there, Thinking Fast and Slow, is currently in the top 5 and has been the top 5 selling book in the UK for non-fiction. So our clients are reading it, the general public are reading it. There's a massive understanding about this area. But still, I think it's difficult to understand what to do with it in terms of advertising. So a little bit of background in this area. So it's taught us a lot of things. And one of the things it's taught us is the idea of System 1 thinking and System 2 thinking. And this is actually from two psychologists, Stanovich and West, but Daniel Kahneman talks about it extensively in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, and is completely based on his thinking. So system 1 is a more primitive part of our brain. It's been there for been there over for millions of years, basically, as we developed. And system 1, as it has up there, is our unconscious mind. It's making 95% of all our decisions for us without us ever being aware. It's highly intuitive. It works on emotions, okay? So it's working on emotional chemicals. It's working on adrenaline, and it's working on dopamine and various other emotional chemicals, which just stores memories for us and tells us what's good and what is bad. It's very fast. It's process automatic. And it's actually the part of the brain that makes decisions. And in fact, if you knock it out, and this is what Antonio Damasio spoke about, and this is largely what kicked it all off back in 1984, was that if you knock out the emotional part of the brain, it is utterly impossible for humans to make a decision. So let's give a bit of background there. Antonio Damasio, who was a neurologist, was working with some patients, and one of his patients was a guy called Elliot. And Elliot had a brain tumor in the orbitocortex, which controls emotion. And he had a brain tumor there. He had an IQ test before he went and had the tumor removed. He was, I think, something like 91 percentile in terms of intelligence. He's a very smart guy. He had the area removed, the tumor removed. He had an IQ test afterwards. His IQ was still exactly the same, 91. It seems to have all gone perfect, except for the fact that Elliot, the poor guy, could not make any decisions whatsoever. Even a simplistic decision like, should I use a red pen or a black pen to sign this document, or what day will I have my meeting next week, he would give you a huge amount of rational information. His rational brain was working perfectly, and he could weigh up pros and cons as to whether a red pen was better or a black pen was better, and he'd give you all those reasons. But he would not pick up a pen, and that's because his emotional brain had been knocked out. His unconscious, emotional section of the brain was no longer working, and he was unable to make decisions. And that's the part of the brain that we actually need to get to if we're going to be communicators. System 2 is a bit we're all aware of. It's conscious, it's reasoning, it weighs up pros and cons. The problem is it's extremely lazy and will try and avoid doing any thinking if it possibly can. It takes a huge amount of effort, it's slow, and it balances factors. And the reason I think this is important is because we believe that System 2 is guiding our behavior. It's just, without even thinking about it, that's what we believe. We believe the voice in our head helps us weigh up pros and cons, and we make decisions. And we weigh up pros and cons all the time, and then we decide things. But it's just not happening. And the reason that's important is because most of our advertising works on the idea of persuasion. Because we believe that we make rational decisions, we create advertising campaigns which try and persuade people of something. They give them a piece of information they currently don't have. You go, well, I'm always going to buy this coffee. And you go, if we just told this person this piece of message would persuade them to buy another coffee, because the brain would weigh it up. It's not how it works, though, unfortunately. The reason we have these sections is it's because of development over years and years and years. So we sort of came out of the trees and started working on the Earth about 2.4 million years ago. And at that point in time, we had to start working in social groups. We had to start thinking for ourselves. We had to avoid new predators. And basically, for survival, our reptilian brain, which is base desires like eat, move, and so on, and our limbic system, which is highly emotional, things that it gets scared or it gets excited by things, that governed all our behavior. And that's been in part of us for a long, long time and has kept us alive. The neocortex is much more recent, and that's the conscious part of the brain that we talk about. So to give you some facts to back up, so the unconscious mind has got 200,000 times the processing power of the conscious mind. Most of our brain activity, the vast majority of our brain activity is unconscious. It can handle 11 million pieces of information at any one time, and yet the conscious brain, at most, can cope with 44. If you were to ask people to remember things, they can hold about 7 pieces of information in their conscious mind at one point, although I've learned this morning that's probably dropped to about 5 as we're all using our mobile phones too much. And 95% of all decisions are instinctive. That's the bit of the brain we need to get to, the bit that's unconscious, the bit that people don't talk about in research groups. In research groups, when you ask someone something, you're going through language, and language is in the conscious part of the brain, so they will give you conscious thoughts back to you. So they'll tell you they buy a particular coffee because it tastes better. But that's utter rubbish. They'll be buying things for much deeper reasons which even they can't access. So our unconscious mind as well, our unconscious brain, in fact our brains in general, they're like these knowledge-acquiring machines. They're constantly making sense of the world around us, and then they use that information they gain to help guide us and to keep us away from danger and move us towards things we like. And obviously that is the part, and that's obviously happening when people buy things in shops or buy cars or decide what house they're going to buy. And it does that in a couple of different ways. So somatic markers are basically memories which are stored with an emotion. Okay? So what happens is something happens around us, and every little thing that happens around us, it has an emotion attached to it, and that emotion is then what gets stored in the memory. And that's how you then make decisions in the future. So if you try something, and it's very nice, you get a little rush of dopamine, that's quite nice, and then that gets stored away as something good. And when you see a situation which is similar to that in the future, you get that little dopamine rush, and you feel good, and then you buy it and eat it again. As far as food's concerned, for example, all food choice is emotional. It's purely a system going, that feels nice, and that's because it's remembered things from previous occasions. If something's bad, then obviously negative emotions get attached to it, and you then avoid it in future. The important thing is that if no emotion gets attached to it, it gets forgotten. It's just an irrelevant piece of information. There's no point storing it. And this obviously is going to become important in terms of when you're developing communication, because we want people to remember things. We want to remember them largely. We want to remember them sort of positively. The other idea is about concepts. So the human brain, obviously, and everyone's aware of this, does not work like a computer. So Secchi, in his book, talked about the idea that how the brain makes sense of the world through the idea of concepts. So we all have a concept of what a car is, okay? Now, when you see a car in the street, even if you've never ever seen that car before, you will still recognize it as a car because you have developed the concept of a car. Now, a computer, what it'd have to do is it'd have to go through a bank of all the images it's ever seen and try and find one that matches at the same angle, the same color, the same distance, the same number of wheels, and all the rest of it. And you go, oh yeah, I recognize that because it matches up. Our brain, we just develop a concept. And we develop concepts constantly around lots and lots of different subjects. And then what happens is when we receive new information, we try and align it to one of the existing concepts in our brain. This is very important for advertising because what you want to try and do is rather than tell someone completely new all the time, you want to align yourself to an existing concept in people's brains. An example of this might be trying to sell something I've worked on before. It's trying to sell cheese. The client had a very specific flavor for their cheese. They said, can you please describe it as this? And that makes no sense to anyone. But we all have a concept of upmarket or posh. And that has loads of things associated with being posh. It probably tastes better, it's probably more expensive, it's probably for people that are more discerning, all these kind of things. So to describe something as posh cheese just links it to an existing concept in people's brains. I'll give a better example of that is actually this Vorsprung-durch technique, which as German speakers in the room will mean something, to someone English means absolutely nothing. All we can tell as an English speaker is that it's German, and it's got the word Technik in, and that sounds quite technical, and that's probably good. That's as far as our understanding of that end line goes. However, it's the most famous car advertising line in the UK by a mile. So when we see that line, what we think is cars, engineering, German, good at engineering, must be quite good. And just through somatic markers and memories and emotional statements about how we feel about Germans and their engineering prowess, we think that is great. Now, when that first line was advertised or went into research groups, so this line went into research groups, the agency developed a campaign. It had that end line on the end. The campaign was brilliant in research. The researcher came back and said, it's all very good. The only thing is, no one understands the end line. So get rid of the end line, change the end line. Now, the client and the agency were very good, and they stuck with it, because what they understood was that when you ask the rational brain, what does this mean? It goes, I don't know, and I don't like knowing things I don't know, so no, that is a rubbish line. The emotional part of the brain, the unconscious brain, just went, oh, that sounds quite good, and there you go. The rest is history. So trying to find those associations to tap into is more powerful than rational pieces of information a lot of the time. The final point is that we are hugely social beings. okay? So the vast majority of what our brain is doing all the time is trying to work out who do we trust, who do we not trust, making assessments of people all the time. It's the unconscious brain working at it again, and you can't turn it off. Okay? As someone stands up and starts talking in front of you, you would have made a whole host of assumptions about whether I should be trusted or ignored or was an idiot or why didn't I learn German at school. But it would be making all these assessments, and you can't turn it off. And because we're always looking for people that we can trust and buy into. And then once we buy into them, this is various hipsters in London, we start merging ourselves with them. We look for people that share the same values. We end up looking like them. We mirror them in terms of our body language. And in fact, body language, we've often understood, and people generally know that the words you use aren't that important. You know, that's only 7% of the communication, apparently, is the words you use. The other 93% will be body language, the tone of the voice, the speed of speech, the clothes you're wearing, the context. All this communicates an awful lot, and words are only a small part of it. And yet, when we come to make advertising, we focus heavily on the message and spend very little time worrying about actually how we're going to say that message. And that ability, the human ability to just even make a huge level of assessments, look where people's eyes are looking, all the rest of it, very, very quickly and continually, is the same set of skills that we decide when we're choosing which brands we want to buy into. So a couple of things come out of that is that relationship building is continuous. Absolutely. So all the time we're building those relationships. So the idea that you can go advertise for a month and then go dark for a long time is dangerous because you're building relationships continuously, and every single interaction matters, and matters importantly. And the other thing is that brands need to find a role in people's lives. Like, they need to work out what kind of relationship you're going to have and then fulfill that relationship as you go forward. It's impossible not to communicate. In the same way, like, even not communicating says something. You walk past someone and they say good morning to you, and you don't say good morning back. That's not communicating. That's a very loud message to that person that you don't care about them in some way. So you're always communicating. So, given all that, I find it surprising that there's still a massive debate about should advertising be rational and how important the rational message is, or should it be emotional? Because it's the emotional brain, which I talk about the unconscious, I swap them all the time, but the unconscious brain and the emotional brain, which is making all the decisions. And this is a quote from another psychologist, that the essential difference between emotion and reason is that emotion leads to action, whilst reason leads to conclusions. We need to stir people's emotions to get them to move forward. And this, I think as well, you have to sort of work on the premise, I understand that most advertising isn't this way around. Most advertising and most advertisers and most marketeers spend most of their time heavily focused on what the message should be. It's all working to a premise if advertising is persuasive. The idea is that we put an advert out to go and persuade something different to what they currently believe. And it works on the premise that the advert goes out, we grab their attention, we give them a piece of information which makes them think differently, and then they go and purchase our product off the back of it. And that is the central thought to most advertising. Now, most people aren't aware that they're working to that model, I think, but most people do work to a persuasion model in the fact that you have to get someone, give them some information that will persuade them of a different way forward. Now, emotion does go into it. Advertisers all the time say, oh, make it emotional, make it emotional. But largely what they mean is make it emotional so that we can get their attention, so we can tell them our rational message. When they get the rational message, it will then persuade them of something different. What I'm trying to say to you is that the message isn't the important bit. It's how you feel off the back of it and which emotion do you want to give them, which is the most important part. I'm going to give a couple. So I've got lots of ads to show. So I'm going to sort of talk through some ads to try and describe what I mean. So I'm going to talk about a particular situation in time. So let's go back to when we first went into the financial crisis, okay? So we're going back to sort of 2006, 2007. We're going into financial crisis. The airline industry is under immense pressure. Airlines are going out of business all over the world. Even national carriers are going out of business, okay? Now let's talk about this rationally, okay? Rationally, let's do some research groups. Rationally, you ask people, why won't you travel? Because I'm worried about my job, I haven't got any money, therefore I won't travel, okay? So one airline went, oh, okay, no one's got any money. They told us that in research groups. we'll give them a different concept. If we lower our prices, will you then travel with us? Yes, definitely. That's rationally a very good answer to that rational problem. We'll travel with you. Perfect. What we'll do is that. So BA, British Airways, they diverted all their advertising into, pretty much all their advertising went into sale-type advertising, advertising a lower price for people. And here's an example.
All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye.
We believe your holiday should start before you arrive. You're our guest. You should expect to check in online, choose where to sit, fly to destinations worldwide. But with thousands of one-way fares from £29, you shouldn't expect to pay the earth.
Lots of rational information in there, lots of things which you think, oh yeah, that definitely makes them a better airline. They look after me, they fly lots of places. At the same time, Virgin ran this campaign.
Miners strike! Miners strike! I'm running out of battery, so shoot me a telex with the figures and I'll digest them in Frankfurt, yeah? You know, forget the numbers, telex me the cash.
Job. I need to change my ticket.
So 2 very different adverts, 2 different very emotions. BA at the end of that year lost £424 million. Virgin made £68 million, which is a bit of an unfair comparison because there's much more complexity to it than that. But on every single line they competed on, every single route they competed on, Virgin gained share and BA lost share. And all the interim tracking measures about being a good quality company, being value for money, all the rest of it, Virgin gained and BA dropped. And yet that Virgin ad doesn't have a message at all. Doesn't. It says that they've been around for 25 years. Well, BA's been around for a lot longer than that, so that's not really a winning message over that point in time. The BA ad gives you lots of information, and it kind of makes you feel quite nice, but quite nice doesn't lead to action. Virgin make you feel like a rock star, make you feel like you are better than other people because you fly on that line, and that's the kind of emotion which your subconscious is going, I kind of like that dopamine rush, and I'm going to go for that. And if people buy into that area. So why is it different, and why am I banging on about this so much? My argument is that to date, the key focus and the campaigns I've worked on, most of the debate we have is around what is the message, okay? So this here is from the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, the IPA in London, and their own documentation, which this is from their own documentation, which says, how do you brief an agency? And also, how do you brief creatives? And the key thing they focus on to this day is what's your key message, proposition, single-minded proposition, strategic benefit. It's rational, okay? What they focus on and what all creatives look at first is what is the message? What do I need to get across? There is very, very little debate, in my experience, of how do I want people to feel. Okay, how does my brand make other people feel versus other brands? People talk a lot about in supermarkets. I spent most of my time working on FMCG. People talk a lot about in supermarkets that people make a decision in under a second. You know, they walk along and they're going to buy some cheese. I worked on cheese. They work on cheese. They pick up a cheese in less than a second. They walk along and they go, oh, I'll take that one, and away they go. Everyone goes, they're not thinking. I need to make them think. They are thinking, they're just thinking unconsciously. Their subconscious or unconscious is making all decisions for them already, and it's about which one feels right. And what we have to do is access that part of the brain and make our brand feel more right than someone else's. Now, you also have to realize that each brand makes them feel something. So you have to work out, well, that brand makes them feel like that brand makes them feel like that. We can make them feel like this, and how can I evoke that emotion? So it's quite a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not, the answer to this is not just be emotional. It's to work out which emotion is the right emotion for you to go for. So that's the situation. So, but this is well known. I mean, I'm sure many of you have read the books. I'm sure many of you know the neuroscience. So why is this still going on? Why is the Institute of Practice, the IPA, still saying it's all about the message? The response has been too simplistic, in my view. So this is a headline from 2006 from Marketing Magazine, probably the key magazine read by clients in the UK. Ads must aim for the heart, not the head. Completely covers it, but it's too simplistic. It's not enough just to say be emotional. That's not my message. This is from much more recently. This was from the summer in Campaign Magazine. All you need is love to make people like your brand more. The idea that the answer to this neuroscience and this revolution that's going on in understanding how humans make decisions is just to be emotional is far too simplistic. And frankly, Birnbeck talked about the fact that you had to be more emotional anyway. We even produced some nice charts to prove that emotional advertising or famous advertising is much more effective than persuasion. But still it goes on. The other response is, so we've got a too simplistic response, and then there's the really, really complicated response. And there's the two extremes. So the other thing is that behavioral economics has kicked off in a very big way. Lots of agencies are getting into behavioral economics. They talk about human biases the whole time, and then they break down all the human biases that happen, and then they give us far, far too many. So they break the social biases break down into 4 areas. Under decision-making biases, there's a total of 49 different biases, and there's another 13 under social and all the rest of it. It becomes too complicated for any marketeer or planner to use. So I'm going to give you a different response. So the response of Draft FCB, this is my one selling chart. The response of Draft FCB was to go, there is so much happening in this arena at the moment, and it is changing every single day. Radio 4 in the UK recently had a whole series about decision-making. It's had a series about how it's affecting law and all the rest of it. And it's whatever I tell you today will largely be different within 6 months because there's so much new learning coming out. So they set up the Institute of Decision-Making and work with leading universities and professors and scientists from around the world in this area. That's one response. Secondly, what I would do is take all that information and try and focus just on maybe 3 questions, which I don't think we think about nearly enough. Okay? So one is which emotion, and spend much more time thinking about that than what the message should be. Currently, we probably spend about 90% of our time working out the message. We go and do concept research, we do research groups, and it's all about what's the message, and then we spend no time at all thinking about the feeling, and that's relegated to tone of voice, and it's normally 4 or 5 random adjectives which don't go together and have had very little thought to them. So think about which emotion. Think about associations you can make so you can link your brand into people's memory by things that already exist. And then think about relationship. What relationship do you actually want to have with people? What role will you have in their lives that they want you to take that role? And think about it in that way. I think this leads to more creative work, by the way, obviously. That's where I'm going with this. People often say that advertising is not art because it's meant to sell. It's a functional, purposeful job. But I think creatives respond badly to that idea. I think art, the purpose of art is to evoke emotion, and not any emotion, a particular emotion. Okay? When people make a horror film, they know they're going out to make you feel scared. When they make a love film, they're going to make you feel gushy. Creatives have got that power. So I think it's much more powerful to go to creatives, and rather than go, can you explain this abstract message to as many people as cheaply as possible? It's much better to go, I need people to feel a sense of awe or a sense of joy or a sense of fear. And then they can use all their creative skills and magic and storytelling and imagery and associations to bring these things to life. So which emotion should we go for? There are various techniques you can use to start getting into this, and this is where I think we should be spending much more of our time. As well as selling cheese, I've also had the joy of selling butter in my life. And when you go to a research group and you ask people why they like a particular butter, they will swear blind that it tastes the best. They will tell you that it's definitely the best, it's got the right level of salt, it's got the right creaminess, the colour's just perfect. You go to a Lurpak group. I don't know what brands you have here, I'm afraid, but in UK we have Lurpak. And they go, oh, it's just the right colour, it's just the right level of saltiness, it's just perfect taste, that's definitely the best butter. Go to an Anchor group, and they will tell you exactly the same. And they'll tell you Lurpak tastes disgusting, but Anchor's just perfect, it's just the right way. That doesn't tell you anything. All you're getting is a rational response, because people have to justify to themselves why they buy a particular butter over another one. So they'll give you a perfectly good justification as to why they do it. We did some research, and we got to understand the deeper emotional needs of people. And what you find out was that people buy Lurpak because they feel themselves quite posh, and they feel they want a sense of discernment. Ultimately, they want to feel they're a little bit better than other people because they're the ones that truly appreciate food versus other people. And that's the emotional need which is being answered there. People that buy, and I shouldn't actually, it doesn't matter, but it could be a sense of harmony, it could be a sense of coming home. We sold a cheese very successfully with no message at all, simply by saying it's like coming home. And then there's beautiful, not that you can read it, but you can break emotions down into much more depth, and you can start doing research to try and find out which brands elicit which emotions. You go here from ecstasy to joy to serenity. They kind of pad out. There's various different models you can use. I'll encourage people to get much more detail into which brands. We worked on cold cures in the UK. One cold cure was definitely better, and we get a lot of colds in the UK because it rains all the time. One cold cure was better than the other one. It was functionally better, and the company knew it's functionally better, so they spent all their time telling people that this was more scientific and more advanced and was definitely better at curing your cold. The other brand couldn't say that because it wasn't as good. So what they did is they just had big sofas and hugs and made people feel comfortable. The reality was the other brand kept doing much better, because when you're stood in front of the fixture and you feel like hell because you've got this horrible cold, the one that gives you that sense of comfort, unconsciously remember, is just like, oh yeah, it seems to reference comfort, which is to do with sofas and whatever else. That's the one that they keep being picked up. So think very much about, when I pick up this brand, what's the emotional reward, the emotional response that people are getting versus the other one. And you can measure them, and they can be different. So this is from pre-testing from a company called Brain Juicer in the UK, who pre-test different ads. I'm going to show you one of them in a second. But they measure the emotion rather than the message. So Gorilla there, Cadbury's Gorilla, makes people feel very happy. That's the green bar. Guinness, Back in Time, very successful ad, makes people feel very happy. But maybe happy is the wrong emotion. Domestos, which is a bleach, it makes people feel disgusted, because disgust will lead to action. The white bar is neutral. That's the killer for any communication. Okay? So the Abbey National ad had lots of information about interest rates, but didn't make people feel anything, got forgotten, didn't work. Charity ad number 1 didn't make people feel very much. Ad number 2 made people feel very sad, and it worked. And so it's very important to try and think about which emotion we're going to go for. Let me show you that Gorilla ad. Again, in some ways it's nonsense. There's no message in here, but let's have a look at it. again, there's no message in there. It doesn't say it tastes better or anything else like that. It's the most successful ad that Cadbury's have ever done. I can't remember the percentages. I think it paid back £4.11 for every pound they spent on media. What it does, it makes you feel a deep sense of joy, as buying chocolate makes you feel, eating chocolate makes you feel a sense of joy. The interesting thing for me is that it was tested beforehand in standard pre-testing techniques, and it absolutely, abysmally failed pre-testing. It was unpersuasive, people didn't understand it, it was hard, it wasn't relevant. This is why I talk about the fact that you have to understand what model of advertising you're working to. Because if you believe in the power of persuasion model of advertising, you will then pre-test to that model. You will then set up tracking studies to that model. You will go out and you'll go, I believe in message, so I'm going to have a tracking study which asks people, what's the main message of this brand? Did you hear it? And I'll measure and judge my agency based on that. If you believe that the subconscious is making 95% of our decisions, then you'll set up different models to try and understand which emotions you're evoking versus someone else. The other thing to say is that Brain Juicer, the people I talked about before, they measured this ad and showed that the reason it worked was it created a much more emotional response than any other advertising. But it's an emotional journey as well. Now, this is good for creatives to understand. They will get this instantly. Is that emotions and storytelling is an emotional journey. That ad works off and people feel you measure it, and at the beginning they feel really confused or surprised, they don't really understand. Then there's a sense of surprise, and there's a sense of joy. It's a beautiful emotional journey that people go on during the course of that ad. It works, I'm going to say this as well, it works for viral as well, because I'm just talking about TV ads here, but just so everyone's aware, it also works with digital. The thing that we do in digital is we share emotions. So another piece of research, I haven't got any slides for this, but people studied what kind of information got shared across the internet. And what people shared was things which got an emotional reaction. We're human beings, we like to build friends, we build relationships, and we do that by sharing emotional feelings. When you meet your friend and you say, what did you go on today? You don't sort of tell the boring stuff, you tell the bit which is quite exciting or a bit annoying or whatever. So the most shared YouTube clip is Charlie Bit My Finger. Charlie Bit My Finger is an emotional roller coaster of a piece of film, because it starts off all quite nice. Charlie bites said finger, and then there's this moment to go, is he going to cry, is he going to cry, is he going to cry? No, he didn't cry, it's all okay. An emotional roller coaster, most shared video. Same theory. Okay, let's just look at ads. So,
Now, Daddy, I'm here to explain to you how to eat an Oreo. Don't laugh, it's very hard. First, you twist it. No. You lick it. You don't have to say but I just can't help myself. Then you put them back together because they're married. You dunk it into the milk, then you eat it.
Can I try?
I don't think you're ready yet.
Only Oreo.
A cute little ad from our agency. What it's really doing is it's associations you have in your childhood. It's about sharing what you learn as a child with your own child, and it's building that emotional connection. It's not just another sweet of which there's loads. It's about building a connection and sharing a way of eating something. I mentioned cheese. It's an ad I worked on.
Put me in your suitcase, let me help you pack, 'cause you're never coming back. Cook me in your breakfast and put me on your plate, 'cause you're
Cathedral City on toast. You see it, you want it.
Again, there's no particular message in there. There's nothing rational in there. It doesn't say it tastes nice. It doesn't say it makes nice cheese on toast. It does say at the end it's the nation's favourite cheddar, but we were forced to stick that on the end. We never actually had it on the original advert. That campaign, before that campaign, we'd done more sort of traditional add cheese tastes nice kind of work. And it hadn't really done what it's meant to do. Off the back of that campaign, which people could argue is generic, non-promoted sales of Cathedral City went up 40%. It's now one of the top 10 UK brands. I can't remember, it's worth 250 million or something. What's most important is that this figure here, which you might not be able to see, the profit that year went up 52%. And everyone in that company was concerned that we'd made a very generic ad saying cheese is nice, or cheese on toast is nice. Well, actually what we've done is they associated all those feelings with Cathedral City, and the sales went up significantly. And I can see from various other measures that we managed to make people believe that this tasted significantly better without once mentioning taste, ever. Cheese on toast, just so you may not be aware, has particular social relevance in the UK. It's something that our mums give us when we come home from school and it's been cold and rainy outside. So that sense of coming home, that feeling of nurture, is very powerful for someone that's British in that ad. Maybe not if you're not British. Let's look at some ads that didn't work.
Salsa. Oh, I love
Okay,
salsa.
Rosita, you love to salsa. Could we have quiet now?
No way. Here comes Crazy Dolores. Oh, it's impossible. I go.
Me too.
But only this place have the pure squeezed orange. Oh, I love you, Rosita. I love you.
Juice me, man. Juice me.
Tropicana. Nothing added, nothing taken away.
I'm hoping you can see these all very well. I realise it's very bright in here. In case you're questioning, you did just see 3 parrots talking a lot about orange juice. That's basically what the ad is. I don't know what you felt off it, but what most people felt off that was a little bit strange, a bit weird, don't understand it. Sales off the back of that were flat. Nothing happened. Let's look at the follow-up ad.
How do you like your eggs in the morning?
I like mine with a kiss.
Boiled or fried?
I'm satisfied as long as I get my kiss.
How do you like your toast in the morning?
New York, 1,000 breakfasts. One juice, preferred by far. Tropicana, gently squeezed from the finest oranges. Nothing added, nothing taken away.
So the first ad had lots of rational information in there, but it made us feel a bit strange. Parrots talking was just a bit weird, doesn't make you feel anything particular. New York, that ad ran in the UK again. New York is aspirational to us, like to go away for a weekend in New York is quite good. So it's made really positive associations with breakfast, and it's made us feel, yeah, I'm the kind of person that gets to go to New York, I feel a little bit superior, and that drove sales significantly off the back of it. The first arrow, flat, parrots. Second arrow, upward, New York. Another example, first of all, something that didn't work.
Martin, my lad, it's time you learnt about the Cravendale Pure Filter Checklist. Fresh milk, whole, semi and skimmed. Tick. All the vitamins and minerals. Tick. No additives or preservatives. Tick. Fewer bacteria, so it stays fresher longer. Tick. And great taste. Tick. Cravendale Pure Filter. Have you got the craving?
So 5 or 6 benefits in there. That Cravendale was a new milk launch, and it's different because it's filtered for longer, so it tastes better and lasts longer. Research groups have told people, taken it to research groups, everyone said, oh yeah, if you just tell us all these things, it will be brilliant. And yeah, after the end of that campaign, they very nearly withdrew the product because it just was not selling at all, and they just thought that the English were never going to buy this filtered drink. In a last attempt, they ran this instead.
Cravendale is no ordinary milk. It's filtered to make it purer. Cravendale tastes so good, the cows want it back.
So a much more emotional response based on fear and humour. And off the back of that, massively successful. So at the end of it, I think the questions to consider, without having to go into all the massive level of neuroscience and biases, is to consider these kind of questions. Is why does your brand exist? Because people only have relationships with other people they understand, and understanding why beyond making money do your brand exist? What are your values? What relationship do you want to have with people? Which emotion will drive behavior? And what associations can you make, which I hopefully have demonstrated through the various examples. And this kind of falls into more detailed questions, such as, which emotion do different brands elicit? So I do think it's not just enough to say make it emotional. It's not even enough to go, we're in the world of chocolate, let's just make it about joy. It's trying to work out where your emotional differences rely to other brands. Which emotion will drive behavior? As the BA ad sort of showed, nice is a nice, warm is a sort of quite nice emotion, but it doesn't drive behavior. Anger, excitement, being ecstatic, they're much more powerful emotional drivers. Which emotion do we want to evoke? And then how we evoke it. And this is where the creatives and their artistic skills really come to fore in terms of language and association and storytelling. Associations I've talked about. What associations does the brand currently have? What associations could we make? And then how can we build our relationship? How do we let people get involved in our brand, and how do we keep them involved? So these are those kind of questions I think I'd recommend you're asking to get into people's unconscious and instinctive decisions. Thanks very much.